Hey everyone, comment where you're watching from today. This story takes us to a defining moment at the Century City Mall in Los Angeles, where what seemed like a routine police response transformed into an unforgettable display of courage and compassion. Sometimes heroes emerge from the most unexpected places, and on this sweltering summer afternoon, that hero would be Sylvester Stallone. The bustling Westfield Century City Mall hummed with its usual weekend energy. The modern glass and steel structure gleamed under the California sun, its 3 levels teeming with shoppers seeking refuge from the 90-degree heat. The food court on the 2nd level was particularly crowded, filled with the mingled aromas of various cuisines and the constant chatter of hundreds of conversations. Among the crowd was Maria Rodriguez, 8 months pregnant with her first child. She had spent the morning at her prenatal appointment with Dr. Lisa Quinn, who had assured her that everything was progressing normally. To celebrate the good news, Maria had treated herself to some shopping, picking up a few last items for the nursery. Now, carefully balancing her tray of food, she navigated through the maze of tables, one hand protectively cradling her swollen belly. The day had been perfect until now, the kind of day that reminded Maria why she had fallen in love with Los Angeles when she first arrived from Mexico City 5 years ago. She had built a good life here, working as a kindergarten teacher at a local elementary school, making friends like Sarah Torres, who had helped her prepare for the baby's arrival. The security tag incident was about to shatter that peace. Officer James Barrett had been having a different kind of day entirely. A 12-year veteran of the force, Barrett had developed a reputation that made his fellow officers uncomfortable. His personnel file, thick with civilian complaints and internal affairs investigations, told the story of a man who saw threats everywhere and responded with escalating force. Today's call about potential shoplifting at the mall was exactly the kind of situation that brought out his worst instincts. The air conditioning hummed quietly overhead as Barrett's heavy boots echoed against the polished floor. He'd received the call about suspicious activity in the Nordstrom section, but something about the pregnant Hispanic woman in the food court caught his attention. Her shopping bags, the way she kept looking around. To Barrett, everything was a sign of guilt. Robin Baker, a college student working at the smoothie kiosk, noticed Barrett's approach and felt a knot form in her stomach. She had seen his type before, officers who seemed to be looking for trouble rather than trying to prevent it. She wasn't the only one watching. At a corner table, partially hidden behind a newspaper, sat Sylvester Stallone, enjoying a rare moment of relative anonymity. Maria had just managed to find an empty table near the window when her shopping bag slipped from her grasp. The contents spilled across the floor, and among them a security tag clattered across the tiles. It was a simple mistake. The new cashier, Andrew Liu, had forgotten to remove it during the rush of weekend shoppers. But to Officer Barrett, it was all the justification he needed. His voice boomed across the food court, cutting through the ambient noise like a knife. "Police! Don't move!" The sudden command caused Maria to jump, nearly losing her balance. Several nearby diners looked up from their meals, conversations dying mid-sentence as the scene began to unfold. Barrett's approach was aggressive from the start, his hand already resting on his weapon as he closed the distance. "Let me see your receipt," he demanded, not even waiting for Maria to regain her composure. She began searching through her purse, hands trembling as she tried to explain about the tag in accented English. "Sir, I have the receipt, please." Maria's voice quivered as she searched her bag. "The cashier, he must have forgotten to remove the tag. I can show you." But Barrett wasn't interested in explanations. In his mind, he had already written the script for how this scene would play out. The officer's next actions would be captured on dozens of cell phones, creating a digital record of what happened next. Barrett roughly grabbed Maria's arm, yanking, her away from the table, despite her visible pregnancy and her pleas. The crowd's reaction was immediate. Gasps of shock and cries of protest filled the air. Michael Washington, a retired high school principal having lunch with his wife, stood up to intervene. "Officer, please, she's pregnant, this isn't necessary." But Barrett was in full command mode now, his face reddening as he began to force Maria toward the ground, ignoring the growing chorus of protests from the crowd. It was at this moment that Stallone made his decision. The newspaper dropped to the table as he rose, his presence immediately drawing attention. He had played heroes in countless movies, but this was different. This was real, with real consequences and real lives at stake. His voice, instantly recognizable, cut through the chaos like a thunderbolt. "That's enough." The words carried the weight of decades of commanding screen presence, but there was nothing theatrical about them. Stallone moved with purposeful calm, placing himself between Barrett and Maria. The officer's head snapped up, recognition flickering across his face as he realized who was confronting him. "Officer Barrett," Stallone read the name tag deliberately, "you're making a mistake here. This woman needs medical attention, not handcuffs." His voice was steady, reasonable, but with an underlying steel that brooked no argument. The crowd had grown larger now, phones recording every moment, every word. Catherine McGrath, an off-duty nurse who had been having lunch with colleagues, pushed through the crowd. "I'm a registered nurse. This woman needs to sit down immediately. Her blood pressure could be dangerously high after this trauma." She moved to Maria's side, professional training taking over as she began to check her vital signs. Barrett found himself in an increasingly untenable position. The celebrity confronting him was just the most visible part of a wall of witnesses that had formed, all recording his actions. Paul Hansen, the mall's security director, had arrived with two of his officers, having been alerted by the commotion. "Mr. Stallone is right," Hansen stated firmly. "We have protocols for suspected shoplifting, and this isn't it. Our cameras show Mrs. Rodriguez making her purchase legally. The tag was simply missed during checkout, something we can verify with store security footage." The situation had completely shifted. What Barrett had intended as a simple arrest had transformed into a potential public relations nightmare. For the department, Stallone's presence ensured this wouldn't be buried in a routine police report. It would be viral before the hour was out. But Stallone wasn't interested in creating a spectacle. His focus remained on Maria's well-being. "Ma'am, are you all right?" he asked, his tone gentle now as he helped her to a chair that someone had brought over. "We're going to make sure you and your baby are taken care of." The next few minutes demonstrated the power of community coming together. Timothy Snow, a local doctor having lunch with his family, joined Catherine in checking on Maria. Beverly Davis, the manager of the store where Maria had made her purchase, arrived with the security footage and original receipt, definitively proving her innocence. Barrett stood awkwardly to the side, his authority effectively neutralized by the combination of public scrutiny and Stallone's commanding presence. The actor hadn't raised his voice or made any aggressive moves, but his moral authority in the situation was absolute. "Officer," Stallone addressed Barrett again, "I grew up in Hell's Kitchen. I've seen what happens when police officers forget. They're supposed to protect and serve, but I've also seen what happens when they remember their true purpose. Which kind of officer do you want to be?" The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The crowd had grown silent, watching the interaction. Barrett's face worked through a series of emotions: anger, embarrassment, and finally, something. That might have been shame. His posture changed, the aggressive stance melting away. John McCarthy, a lawyer who had witnessed the entire incident, stepped forward. "I'll be happy to provide my card to Mrs. Rodriguez and file a formal report about what I've witnessed here today. This kind of behavior cannot go unchallenged." But Maria, still shaken but recovering her composure, showed remarkable grace. "I don't want anyone to lose their job," she said softly. "I just want everyone to learn from this. My students, I teach kindergarten. They learn about respect and kindness every day. We adults should remember these lessons too." Stallone nodded approvingly at her words. "Sometimes the greatest strength is shown in forgiveness," he said. "But forgiveness doesn't mean we don't make changes. Officer Barrett, I hope you'll think about what happened here today. Think about how differently this could have ended. The mall's management had called for medical personnel as a precaution, and paramedics were now arriving to check on Maria." The crowd began to disperse, but not before many had captured the entire incident on their phones. Social media was already lighting up with videos and accounts of what had happened. Paul Hansen, the security director, assured Maria that the mall would cover any medical expenses related to the incident. "We want to make this right," he said. "What happened here today was unacceptable, and we need to ensure it never happens again." Stallone stayed until he was sure Maria was being properly cared for. Before leaving, he shared a quiet moment with her. "You showed real courage today," he told her. "Your child is lucky to have such a strong mother." He then turned to address the remaining onlookers. "What we saw today is both a warning and a hope," he said. "A warning about what happens when authority is abused, but also hope for what can happen when people stand together against injustice. Remember this moment. Remember that each of us has the power to make a difference." The incident would have lasting repercussions. Barrett would be placed on administrative leave pending an investigation. The police department would announce a review of its training procedures, particularly regarding interactions with pregnant women and minorities. The mall would implement new security tag protocols to prevent similar miscommunications. But perhaps the most significant impact was on the community itself. The video of Stallone's intervention went viral, not just because of his celebrity status, but because it demonstrated how one person's willingness to stand up could inspire others to do the same. It became a teaching moment about civil rights, about the proper use of authority, and about the power of community solidarity. In the days that followed, Maria's story would be shared across national news outlets. She would become a symbol of dignity in the face of injustice, and her grace in handling the situation would be widely praised. Stallone's intervention would be cited as an example of celebrity influence being used for positive change. The story resonated because it touched on universal themes: the abuse of power, the importance of standing up for what's right, and the power of community action. It showed that heroism isn't just about physical strength or dramatic actions. Sometimes it's about having the moral courage to say enough when witnessing injustice. Share this video if you believe in standing up for what's right, and let us know in the comments about a time when you witnessed someone step in to help another person in need. Remember, it doesn't take superhuman strength to be a hero. Sometimes all it takes is the courage to speak up when others stay silent. And don't forget to comment where you're watching from today. This story reminds us that no matter where we are in the world, we all have the power to make a difference in our communities. The aftermath of the Century City Mall incident spread through Los Angeles like wildfire. While the viral video of Sylvester Stallone confronting Officer Barrett had captured the world's attention, the real story was just beginning to unfold. Behind the scenes, a complex web of relationships, power struggles, and institutional changes would emerge, transforming a single moment of intervention into a catalyst for systemic change. David Smith, the Los Angeles Police Department's internal affairs chief, sat in his office reviewing the footage for the 100th time. The security cameras had captured angles that cell phones missed, and each viewing revealed new details that complicated the investigation. Barrett's personnel file lay open on his desk, a thick dossier of previous incidents that could no longer be ignored. "This isn't just about one officer," Smith explained to Robin Baker, who had come forward as a key witness. The former smoothie kiosk worker had become an unexpected advocate for police reform, her detailed account of Barrett's aggressive behavior providing crucial context for the investigation. "We're looking at a pattern that should have been addressed years ago. At Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, Maria Rodriguez was undergoing a thorough examination by Dr. Aaron Sanders, a high-risk pregnancy specialist. The stress of the incident had raised concerns about potential complications, and the hospital was taking no chances. In the waiting room, Stallone sat with Maria's husband, Eric Carrillo, who had rushed from his construction job site after seeing the viral video. "Your wife showed incredible courage," Stallone told Eric, his voice carrying the same quiet intensity that had faced down Barrett. "But she shouldn't have had to." The actor had refused to leave until he was certain Maria and her baby were out of danger, his presence keeping media attention focused on the issue rather than letting it fade into yesterday's news. Meanwhile, at the LAPD headquarters, Chief Cynthia Guzman was dealing with the mounting pressure for institutional reform. The incident had exposed deep-rooted issues within the department, and the usual strategies of damage control weren't going to work. This time, the video had resonated with too many people, touching a nerve in a city still grappling with its history of police relations. "We need to get ahead of this," Deborah Kelly, the department's public relations director, advised during an emergency meeting. "The public wants more than just Barrett's badge. They want assurance that this won't happen again." The conference room was filled with senior officers, including Mary Reed, the training coordinator who had been warning about gaps in de-escalation protocols for years. The mall's security team, led by Paul Hansen, was conducting its own review. The footage showed that Barrett had bypassed standard security protocols, ignoring the mall's own trained personnel who could have easily verified Maria's purchase. Chad Lamb, one of the security officers on duty that day, had attempted to intervene but was aggressively dismissed by Barrett. "We had multiple opportunities to prevent this," Hansen explained to Lisa Wallace, the mall's general manager, "but the system only works if all parties respect the established procedures." The incident had exposed weaknesses in the mall's security protocols, particularly regarding cooperation between private security and law enforcement. The story took an unexpected turn when Angel Martinez, a former rookie officer who had briefly partnered with Barrett, came forward. "What happened at the mall wasn't an isolated incident," Martinez revealed in an interview with local news. "Barrett had a pattern of escalating routine situations, especially with minorities. I reported it through proper channels, but nothing changed." This revelation sparked a deeper investigation into the department's handling of previous complaints against Barrett. Jennifer Bell, a civil rights attorney working with the ACLU, began assembling a pattern of similar incidents that had been systematically downplayed or ignored. The mall incident wasn't just about one officer losing control. It was about a system that had repeatedly failed to address problematic behavior. The impact rippled through the community. At Maria's school, where she taught kindergarten, parents and teachers rallied in support. Sarah Rose, the school principal, organized a community forum to discuss the broader implications of what had happened. "Our children are watching," she reminded the packed auditorium. "They're learning how society responds to injustice." Stallone's continued involvement kept the story in the national spotlight. Unlike many celebrity interventions that faded after the initial publicity, he remained engaged, working with local community leaders to transform the incident into meaningful change. His production company began developing a documentary about police reform, using Maria's story as a starting point for a broader examination of law enforcement practices. Back at the Century City Mall, changes were already visible. Timothy Roth, the new security training coordinator, implemented enhanced protocols for dealing with law enforcement. Security staff received additional training in de-escalation techniques, and clear guidelines were established for when and how police should be involved in retail incidents. The ripple effects continued to spread. Other police departments across the country began reviewing their own procedures, particularly regarding interactions with pregnant women and minority communities. Stephen Reynolds, a police reform advocate, used the incident as a case study in his nationwide training program for law enforcement agencies. Maria's recovery became a symbol of resilience. Despite the trauma of the incident, she remained focused on her upcoming delivery and her return to teaching. The support she received from the community helped her transform her experience into a powerful teaching moment for her young students. About standing up to injustice, we tell children to look for helpers in scary situations, she explained to Robert Simpson, a journalist covering her story. That day at the mall, everyone got to see what happens when people choose to be those helpers. Her words resonated with readers, capturing the essence of how community intervention had changed the outcome. The legal proceedings moved forward methodically. John Nelson, the district attorney, launched a comprehensive review of Barrett's past. Arrests, looking for similar patterns of misconduct. The investigation expanded beyond Barrett, examining how the department had handled previous complaints and identifying systemic failures in oversight. Barrett himself remained suspended, his future in law enforcement uncertain. The officers' union, typically quick to defend its members, maintained an unusual silence. The video evidence, combined with the emerging pattern of past behavior, made their usual strategies of defense untenable. Chief Guzman faced mounting pressure to implement substantial reforms. Working with Mary Ruiz, a respected community relations consultant, she began developing new training protocols that emphasized de-escalation and cultural sensitivity. The department's use of force policies underwent a complete overhaul. The Century City Mall incident became a case study in police reform circles. Kyle Arnold, a criminology professor at UCLA, incorporated it into his curriculum, using it to illustrate both the problems in current policing practices and the potential for community-driven change. What makes this case unique, he explained, is how it demonstrates the power of collective action in the face of authority abuse. The security tag issue that triggered the incident led to changes in retail practices. Beverly Davis worked with other store managers to implement new procedures for tag removal and security checks. The goal was to prevent similar misunderstandings while maintaining effective loss prevention measures. Stallone's production company interviewed key witnesses for the documentary. Lacey Orozco, who had captured the clearest video of the confrontation, shared her perspective on how the incident unfolded. What struck me wasn't just Stallone's intervention, she recalled, but how his action gave others the courage to step forward. The ACLU, represented by Jennifer Bell, used the case to push for broader reforms. They argued that the incident highlighted the need for better police oversight and more effective mechanisms for addressing citizen complaints. The organization began working with state legislators to draft new accountability measures. Maria's experience became part of a larger narrative about community policing. Andrew Pierce, a community organizer, used it to illustrate the importance of civilian oversight and the power of public documentation. Phones and social media have changed the dynamic, he explained, but it's not just about recording incidents. It's about coming together as a community to demand change. The hospital where Maria was treated initiated new protocols for handling patients who had experienced law enforcement confrontations. Dr. Aaron Sanders worked with the emergency department to develop guidelines for assessing and treating pregnant women who had undergone traumatic experiences. The story continued to evolve as more people came forward with their own experiences. Michael Wright, a local business owner, shared a similar encounter with Barrett from the previous year. These accounts helped establish a pattern that strengthened the case for departmental reform. In the weeks following the incident, the Century City Mall became an unexpected hub for community dialogue. Paul Hansen worked with local organizations to host forums on public safety and community relations. The discussions brought together law enforcement, security professionals, and community members to develop better approaches to public safety. The documentary project expanded to examine similar incidents nationwide. Stephen Richardson, a civil rights historian, provided context about how individual acts of resistance had historically led to broader social changes. What happened at the mall fits into a larger pattern of moments where public witness transformed private injustice into catalysts for reform, he explained. Maria's return to teaching was marked by a renewed sense of purpose. She incorporated lessons about community and justice into her kindergarten curriculum, using age-appropriate ways to help her young students understand the importance of standing up for others. The incident's impact on police training became evident as departments across the country requested copies of the footage for use in their programs. Mary Reed developed a comprehensive case study that examined not just what went wrong, but how proper intervention could prevent similar situations. 6 months after the incident, the changes were substantial and ongoing. Barrett had been dismissed. From the force, new training protocols were in place, and the mall's security procedures had been completely revamped. But perhaps more importantly, the community had discovered its own power to effect change. Maria gave birth to a healthy baby girl, with Catherine McGrath, the nurse who had helped her at the mall, assisting in the delivery. The birth represented more than just a happy ending to a traumatic incident. It symbolized hope for positive change in community police relations. Stallone's documentary premiered at a local theater with Maria and her family as guests of honor. The film didn't just recount the incident. It explored how communities could work together to prevent similar situations and respond effectively when they occurred. The story's impact continued to ripple outward, inspiring other communities to examine their own law enforcement practices and community response systems. What had started as a moment of crisis had transformed into a movement for positive change. Share this video to spread awareness about the power of community action, and comment below with your thoughts on how we can all work together to create safer, more just communities. Don't forget to let us know where you're watching from. This is a story that resonates with people everywhere. The incident at Century City Mall could have ended very differently. Instead, it became a testament to what can happen when people choose to stand together against injustice. As Maria often tells her kindergarten students, sometimes the scariest moments can lead to the most important changes if we're brave enough to help each other through them. 1 year after the Century City Mall incident, Los Angeles had become ground zero for a nationwide conversation about police reform and community empowerment. What began with Sylvester Stallone stepping between an aggressive officer and a pregnant woman had evolved into a movement that was reshaping how cities approached public safety and community relations. Lisa Quinn, now heading the newly established Community Oversight Committee, sat in her office reviewing the statistics from the past year. The numbers told a compelling story. Complaints against officers had decreased by 40%, while positive community interactions had risen dramatically. But numbers only told part of the story. The real change is in how people view their role in public safety, Quinn explained to Isaiah Allen, a visiting researcher from the Justice Reform Institute. What happened at Century City Mall showed everyone that they had a voice. that they could make a difference. The incident had become a case study in effective community intervention. Maria Rodriguez, whose confrontation with Officer Barrett had sparked the movement, had just returned to teaching after her maternity leave. Her daughter, now 8 months old, had become a symbol of hope for the community. The kindergarten teacher had transformed her experience into a gentle but powerful lesson for her young students about standing up for what's right. Stallone's documentary, Standing Together, had premiered to critical acclaim and, more importantly, had sparked similar initiatives across the country. Chad Price, a former police officer turned reform advocate, had been using the film in his training programs, showing how the incident represented both a failure of traditional policing and a triumph of community intervention. What makes the Century City case so powerful, Price explained during a training session, is that it shows both what can go wrong and how we can make it right. The security footage and cell phone videos had become teaching tools, used to demonstrate how situations could be de-escalated rather than intensified. At LAPD headquarters, Chief Bianca Andrews was implementing the most comprehensive reform package in the department's history. The changes went far beyond new training protocols. They represented a fundamental shift in how the department viewed its role in the community. We are moving away from the warrior mindset and toward a guardian approach, Andrews explained to Patrick Gibson, a journalist covering the department's transformation. What happened at Century City Mall forced us to confront some uncomfortable truths about how we've been doing things. The mall itself had become an unexpected hub for community policing innovation. Paul Hanson's security team had developed new protocols that were being adopted by shopping centers across the country. The focus was on prevention, de-escalation, and community engagement rather than confrontation and force. Sarah Torres, who had supported Maria through her pregnancy and the aftermath of the incident, had started a non-profit organization called Community Guardians. The group trained civilians in peaceful intervention techniques and worked to build bridges between law enforcement and local communities. What we learned from Maria's experience, Torres explained during a community workshop, is that bystanders have power, but that power needs to be channeled constructively. Her organization had already trained over 1,000 community members in effective intervention strategies. The ripple effects continued to spread. Andrew Liu, the cashier whose forgotten security tag had triggered the original incident, had become an advocate for retail worker rights and improved training procedures. His testimony about the pressure put on retail workers had led to industry-wide changes in security protocols. Eric Horn, a psychology professor studying the incident's impact, had identified what he called the Stallone effect, the phenomenon where one person's willingness to stand up against injustice inspired others to do the same. It's not about celebrity, he argued, it's about moral courage becoming contagious. The Century City Mall had embraced its role as a symbol of positive change. Beverly Davis had worked with community leaders to establish a monthly forum where residents could meet with local law enforcement in a neutral, constructive environment. These community connections events had become a model for other cities. Officer Barrett's case had led to broader accountability measures. John McCarthy, who had witnessed the original incident, had helped draft new legislation requiring more transparent handling of police misconduct complaints. The old system of internal investigations wasn't working, he explained. We needed independent oversight. Maria's story had become part of the official training curriculum for new officers. Mary Reed, the police academy instructor who had advocated for reform long before the incident, now used it to teach recruits about the importance of de-escalation and community trust. Every officer needs to understand that authority comes with responsibility, Reed emphasized to her classes. What happened at Century City Mall shows how quickly things can go wrong when we forget that. Her revised training program had been adopted by police academies across the state. The security industry had undergone its own transformation. Timothy Snow, who had helped check on Maria after the incident, had developed new guidelines for cooperation between private security and law enforcement. We needed clear protocols for who handles what and how we work together, he explained. The documentary's impact continued to grow. Robin Baker, whose initial testimony had been crucial to the investigation, had become a regular speaker at police reform conferences. Her perspective as a civilian witness helped bridge the gap between law enforcement and community perspectives. What I saw that day changed how I view my role as a citizen, Baker told audiences. We can't just be passive observers when we see injustice. Her message resonated with people who had witnessed similar incidents but had felt powerless to intervene. The mall security footage had become a powerful teaching tool. Chad Lamb, analyzing it for a police training seminar, pointed out the multiple moments where different choices could have prevented the escalation. Every interaction has decision points, he explained. We need to train officers to recognize and use them. The incident had also sparked changes in how businesses approached security. Lisa Wallace, consulting with retail associations, had developed new guidelines for handling suspected shoplifting that emphasized verification before confrontation. The old approach of immediate accusation was creating more problems than it solved, she noted. Stallone's continued involvement kept the momentum going. Unlike many celebrity-driven causes that faded quickly, his commitment to reform had remained steady. He worked with Stephen Reynolds to develop follow-up programs that built on the documentary's impact. Celebrity can open doors, Stallone explained, during a community forum, but it's the community that has to walk through them. His pragmatic approach to reform had helped keep the focus on achievable changes rather than unrealistic demands. The medical community had also evolved its protocols. Catherine Morrow, the emergency room doctor who had treated Maria, had developed new guidelines for handling patients who had experienced law enforcement confrontations. We needed to address both the physical and psychological impacts, she explained. The story had become part of the city's narrative about positive change. Michael Washington, documenting the year's developments for a local news station, noted how the incident had transformed from a potential tragedy into a catalyst for improvement. It showed us what we could accomplish when we worked together. He observed, community engagement had reached new levels. Deborah Kelly, organizing neighborhood watch programs, had incorporated lessons from the incident into citizen training. We teach people how to be effective witnesses and advocates, she explained. It's about constructive involvement, not confrontation. The legal system had also evolved. Jennifer Bell, working with the district attorney's office, had helped establish new protocols for handling police misconduct cases. The old system of internal reviews wasn't sufficient, she noted. We needed independent oversight with real authority. Maria's classroom had become a model for teaching young children about community and justice. We talk about helpers, she explained to visiting educators, about how everyone can be a helper when they see someone in need. Her gentle approach to difficult topics had been adopted by other teachers. The security tag issue that sparked the incident had led to technological innovations. Aaron Berry, developing new retail security systems, had created protocols that prevented similar misunderstandings. Technology should prevent problems, not create them, he emphasized. The mall's transformation continued. Paul Hansen worked with community groups to make the space more welcoming and inclusive. A shopping center should be more than just retail, he explained. It should be a true community space. Training programs had evolved significantly, Mary Ruiz, conducting workshops for both law enforcement and private security, emphasized the importance of cultural competency. Understanding the community you serve is as important as knowing procedures, she insisted. The incident's impact on police culture was profound. David Smith, studying department morale, found that officers who embraced the new community-oriented approach reported higher job satisfaction. When you build trust, the job becomes more rewarding, he noted. The movement had spread beyond Los Angeles. Sarah Rose, consulting with other cities, helped them develop their own community engagement programs. Every community is different, she explained, but the principles of respect and communication are universal. 1 year later, the Century City Mall incident remained a powerful reminder of how communities could come together to create positive change. The security cameras that had captured Barrett's aggression now recorded a different story, one of cooperation, understanding, and mutual respect. Maria's daughter, growing up in this changed environment, would never know the fear her mother had felt that day. Instead, she would learn about how her community had stood together, how one person's courage had inspired others, and how a moment of crisis had become an opportunity for transformation. Share this video to spread the message that positive change is possible when communities work together. Comment below with your own stories of community transformation, and don't forget to let us know where you're watching from. The movement that started at Century City Mall continues to grow, one community at a time. Remember, as Stallone often says in his community presentations, the real heroes aren't in movies, they're in our neighborhoods, standing up for what's right, working together to make things better. The story of the Century City Mall incident proves that when we stand together, real change is possible. 18 months after the Century City Mall incident, what began as a local confrontation had evolved into a national movement for police, reform, and community empowerment. The story of Sylvester Stallone's intervention had become more than just a viral moment. It had sparked a fundamental shift in how communities across America approached public safety and civil rights. Aaron Sanders, addressing a packed auditorium at a national conference on community policing, clicked through slides showing the remarkable statistics. In cities that have adopted what we now call the Century City model, we're seeing a 30% reduction in use of force incidents and a 60% increase in positive community police interactions, he reported. The model, developed through careful analysis of what went right and wrong that day, had become a blueprint for reform. Adam Pierce, the program director for the National Coalition for Police Accountability, had distilled the incident's lessons into actionable guidelines that were being implemented across the country. What made the Century City incident different, Pierce explained to the assembled police chiefs and community leaders, was how it demonstrated the power of proper intervention. It wasn't just about what went wrong, it showed us how to make things right. Back in Los Angeles, Maria Rodriguez had just finished speaking to a group of new police recruits. Her story, now part of the standard training curriculum, carried even more weight as she stood there visibly pregnant with her second child. The fear she had experienced that day at the mall had transformed into a powerful tool for change. I tell them about the fear, yes, she explained to Andrew Liu, who had gone from being the cashier who forgot to remove a security tag to becoming a prominent advocate for retail workers' rights. But more importantly, I tell them about the hope, about how one person standing up gave others the courage to do the same. The documentary, Standing Together, had grown into a series, with Stallone's production company tracking similar stories of community intervention across the country. Beverly Davis, who had witnessed the original incident, now served as a consulting producer, ensuring that each episode maintained the focus on practical solutions rather than sensationalism. These aren't just stories about what's wrong with the system, Davis emphasized during a production meeting. They're about how communities are coming together to fix it. The series had become required viewing in police academies and community organizing programs nationwide. The Century City Mall itself had transformed into a national training center for innovative security practices. Paul Hansen worked with Chad Lamb to develop programs that emphasize de-escalation and community engagement. Security officers from across the country came to learn what Hansen called the new approach to public safety. We're not just preventing crime, Hansen explained to a group of visiting security directors. We're building community trust. The mall's monthly community forums, started in the wake of the incident, had become a model for business community partnerships. The legal landscape had shifted significantly. John McCarthy, working with state legislators, had helped draft what became known as the Community Protection Act. The law, already adopted by 12 states, established clear guidelines for police accountability and civilian oversight. What happened at Century City Mall showed us the gaps in our legal framework, McCarthy explained during a legislative hearing. This law ensures that we have the tools to prevent similar incidents and respond appropriately when they do occur. The impact on police training had been profound. Mary Reid, whose warnings about inadequate de-escalation training had gone unheeded before the incident, now headed a national commission on police reform. Her evidence-based approach to training had revolutionized how departments prepared their officers. We're moving away from a warrior mindset, Reid explained to Lisa Wallace, who was documenting the changes for a national police journal. The new model emphasizes guardianship, community connection, and problem-solving skills. The retail industry had undergone its own transformation. Stephen Reynolds had worked with major retailers to develop new security protocols that emphasized verification and de-escalation over confrontation. The changes had led to a significant reduction in confrontational incidents while maintaining effective loss prevention. The old approach was creating more problems than it solved, Reynolds noted during an industry conference. We needed to find a way to protect assets without criminalizing customers. His team had developed technology that helped prevent the kind of misunderstandings that had triggered the Century City incident. The movement had gained unexpected allies. Timothy Snow, a former skeptic of police reform, had become one of its strongest advocates after witnessing the positive changes. In his own department, I used to think reform meant being soft on crime, he admitted. Now I understand it's about being smart, about public safety. Stallone's continued involvement kept the momentum going. Unlike many celebrity-driven causes that faded with time, his commitment to reform had remained steady. He worked with Sarah Torres to develop community intervention training programs that were being implemented nationwide. Celebrity can open doors, Stallone explained during a national forum, but it's the communities that create lasting change. His practical approach had helped keep the movement focused on achievable goals rather than abstract demands. The medical community had also evolved its protocols. Catherine McGrath, working with emergency departments across the country, had developed new guidelines for treating patients who had experienced law enforcement confrontations. We needed to address both the physical and psychological impacts, she explained. The impact on police culture was significant. Michael Washington, studying department morale in cities that had adopted the new approach, found that officers reported higher job satisfaction and better community relationships. When you build trust, the job becomes more rewarding, he noted. The security industry had undergone a complete transformation. Eric Carrillo, developing training programs for private security officers, emphasized the importance of community engagement. Security isn't just about preventing bad things, he explained. It's about creating safe spaces where good things can happen. The movement had sparked technological innovation. Robin Baker had worked with tech companies to develop apps that helped communities document and report incidents while also facilitating positive police-community interactions. Technology should bring us together, not drive us apart, she emphasized. The impact on youth education had been particularly significant. Deborah Kelly had developed programs that taught young people about their rights and responsibilities in public spaces. We're raising a generation that understands both their rights and their role in community safety, she explained. The Century City model had proven particularly effective in diverse communities. Jennifer Bell, studying its implementation across different demographics, found that it helped bridge cultural gaps between law enforcement and the communities they served. It creates a framework for mutual understanding, she noted. Maria's approach to teaching young children about community and justice had been adopted by schools nationwide. We talk about helpers, she explained to visiting educators, about how everyone can be a helper when they see someone in need. Her gentle approach to difficult topics had resonated with educators struggling to address these issues with young students. The movement had also influenced how businesses approached community relations. David Smith, consulting with major corporations, helped them develop protocols that emphasized community engagement over confrontation. The Century City incident showed us that good community relations is good business, he explained. The legal system had evolved significantly. Aaron Berry, working with prosecutors' offices across the country, had helped establish new protocols for handling cases involving police misconduct. We needed a more transparent and accountable system, he noted. The impact on police recruitment had been notable. Bianca Andrews, studying changing demographics in police academies, found that the new approach was attracting a more diverse pool of candidates. People want to be part of positive change, she observed. The movement had also influenced how media covered police-community interactions. Patrick Gibson, training journalists in the new approach, emphasized the importance of context and solutions-oriented reporting. We need to tell the whole story, he insisted, not just the moments of conflict. The Century City Mall incident had become a case study in effective community response. Isaiah Allen, analyzing its impact for a major research institution, found that it had changed how people viewed their role in public safety. It showed that community members aren't just witnesses, they're participants in creating safety, he explained. The movement had also influenced corporate policies. Chad Price, working with major retailers, had helped develop new approaches to loss prevention that emphasized prevention over confrontation. We needed to find ways to protect assets without creating confrontations, he noted. The impact on community organizations had been significant. Sarah Rose had developed programs that helped communities build effective partnerships with law enforcement. It's about creating structures for ongoing dialogue and cooperation, she explained. The movement had also influenced how cities designed public spaces. Lisa Quinn, working with urban planners, helped develop guidelines that emphasized community, engagement and safety through environmental design. The physical environment plays a crucial role in community safety, she noted. The Century City model had proven particularly effective in addressing systemic issues. John Nelson, studying its implementation in cities across the country, found that it helped address long-standing tensions between law enforcement and marginalized communities. It creates a framework for rebuilding trust, he explained. Share this video to help spread awareness about how communities across the country are working together to create positive change. Comment below with your own stories of community transformation, and don't forget to let us know where you're watching from. The movement that started at Century City Mall continues to grow, one community at a time. As Stallone often reminds audiences in his community presentations, real change happens when ordinary people decide to do extraordinary things. The story of the Century City Mall incident continues to inspire communities across America to stand up, speak out, and work together for positive change. Remember, we all have the power to make a difference. Sometimes all it takes is the courage to stand up for what's right. 2 years after the Century City Mall incident, a special ceremony was taking place in the mall's central courtyard. The space, once the scene of a confrontation that could have ended tragically, had been transformed into a permanent reminder of how communities can come together to create positive change. Sylvester Stallone, standing beside Maria Rodriguez and her 2 children, unveiled a plaque that would serve as a lasting testament to that transformative moment. "This plaque isn't just about what happened that day," Stallone told the assembled crowd. "It's about what happens when people choose to stand up for what's right." The ceremony marked the official launch of the National Center for Community Safety Innovation, headquartered in the renovated wing of Century City Mall. David Smith, now serving as the center's executive director, had worked with Aaron Sanders to develop comprehensive programs that were being implemented across the country. What we learned from the Century City incident wasn't just about police reform, Smith explained. It was about how communities can work together to prevent crises before they occur. The center's first initiative was already showing remarkable results. Mary Reed, heading the training division, had developed what she called the Guardian Protocol, a comprehensive approach to public safety that emphasized prevention, de-escalation, and community engagement. "We're seeing a fundamental shift in how communities approach public safety," Reed reported to Lisa Wallace, who was documenting the center's impact for a national publication. "The old model of reactive policing is being replaced by proactive, community engagement." Maria's story had become central to this new approach. Her experience, initially a potential tragedy, had transformed into a powerful tool for change. The kindergarten teacher, now expecting her 3rd child, continued to share her story with police academies and community groups across the country. "When I tell my story," Maria explained to Andrew Liu during a training session, "I always emphasize that change is possible. What happened that day could have gone very differently if people hadn't chosen to stand up and get involved." The impact of the Century City model had exceeded all expectations. Beverly Davis, analyzing data from cities that had implemented the program, reported significant improvements in both public safety metrics and community satisfaction. "We're seeing reduced crime rates alongside increased community trust," she noted. Paul Hansen's security team had become national leaders in innovative public safety practices. Working with Chad Lamb, they had developed training programs that emphasized what Hansen called the 3 C's: communication, cooperation, and community. "Security isn't just about preventing bad things from happening," Hansen explained to a group of visiting security directors. "It's about creating an environment where good things can flourish." His team's approach had been adopted by shopping centers and public venues across the country. The legal framework supporting these changes had also evolved. John McCarthy, working with Jennifer Bell, had helped establish what became known as the Community Safety Act, comprehensive legislation that provided both guidelines and protections for community-based public safety initiatives. The law now recognizes that public safety is a shared responsibility, McCarthy explained during a legislative briefing. It provides clear frameworks for how communities and law enforcement can work together effectively. The retail industry had undergone its own transformation. Eric Carrillo had worked with major retailers to develop what he called prevention through partnership, an approach that emphasized cooperation between stores, security personnel, and customers. The old adversarial model wasn't just ineffective. Carrillo noted during an industry conference, it was creating the very problems it was supposed to prevent. His team's new approach had led to significant reductions in both theft and confrontational incidents. The medical community had also evolved its approach. Catherine McGrath, working with emergency departments nationwide, had developed protocols for what she termed trauma-informed public safety response. Her work ensured that medical professionals were better prepared to handle cases involving law enforcement interactions. "We're not just treating physical injuries," McGrath explained. "We're addressing the psychological impact of these incidents and working to prevent them from happening in the first place." The impact on police culture had been profound. Michael Washington, studying departments that had adopted the new approach, found that officers reported higher job satisfaction and better community relationships. "When you build trust," he observed, "everyone benefits." Stallone's documentary series had expanded to include stories from across the country. Sarah Torres, serving as executive producer, ensured that each episode focused on practical solutions rather than just highlighting problems. "We're showing people what's possible," she explained. The center's youth education programs, developed by Deborah Kelly, had become part of school curricula nationwide. "We're teaching young people about their rights and responsibilities," Kelly explained, "but more importantly, we're showing them how they can be part of positive change." The technology sector had also contributed to the movement. Robin Baker had worked with developers to create apps that facilitated community police communication and accountability. "Technology should bring us together," she emphasized, "not drive us apart." The impact on urban planning had been significant. Timothy Snow had developed guidelines for what he called community-centered design, an approach that emphasized creating public spaces that promoted safety through engagement rather than surveillance. "The physical environment plays a crucial role in public safety," Snow explained during a planning conference. "We need to create spaces that bring people together rather than keep them apart." The center's research division, headed by Isaiah Allen, had documented the movement's impact across different communities. "We're seeing positive changes in everything from crime rates to community engagement," he reported. "But more importantly, we're seeing changes in how people view their role in public safety." The corporate world had also embraced the movement. Chad Price had worked with major companies to develop what he called community-first security, an approach that emphasized engagement over enforcement. "Good community relations is good business," he noted. The impact on media coverage had been notable. Patrick Gibson had developed guidelines for what he termed solutions-focused reporting, an approach that emphasized constructive coverage of public safety issues. "We need to show both the problems and the solutions," he insisted. The center's training programs had attracted international attention. Bianca Andrews had worked with delegations from around the world, helping them adapt the Century City model to their own communities. "The principles are universal," she explained, "even if the specific applications vary." The movement had also influenced how cities approached public events. Lisa Quinn had developed protocols for what she called community-engaged event security, an approach that emphasized cooperation between organizers, security personnel, and attendees. The impact on community organizations had been significant. Sarah Rose had developed programs that helped communities build effective partnerships with law enforcement. "It's about creating structures for ongoing dialogue," she explained. The center's research had revealed unexpected benefits. John Nelson, studying the program's implementation, found that it had positive effects on everything from mental health to economic development. "When people feel safe and connected," he noted, "communities thrive." Maria's classroom had become a model for teaching young children about community and justice. "We talk about helpers," she explained to visiting educators, about how everyone can be a helper when they see someone in need. The movement had also influenced how businesses approached customer service. Aaron Berry had developed training programs that emphasized what he called community-centered service, an approach that focused on building relationships rather than just handling transactions. The impact on police recruitment had been significant. Adam Pearce had found that departments adopting the new approach attracted more diverse and community-oriented candidates. "People want to be part of positive change," he observed. The center's conflict resolution programs, developed by Stephen Reynolds, had proven particularly effective. "We're teaching people how to prevent conflicts from escalating," he explained. "But more importantly, we're showing them how to build understanding." The movement had also influenced how cities handled special events. Mary Ruiz had developed protocols for what she called community-first event management, an approach that emphasized cooperation between organizers, security personnel, and attendees. As the ceremony at Century City Mall concluded, Stallone addressed the crowd one final time. 2 years ago, this place was the scene of a confrontation that could have ended tragically, he said. Today, it's a symbol of what's possible when communities come together. The plaque we're unveiling isn't just about remembering what happened, it's about inspiring what comes next. The plaque's inscription read, "On this spot, ordinary people chose to stand together against injustice. Their courage reminds us that we all have the power to create positive change." The Century City movement began here, but its story continues in communities across America. Share this video to help spread the message that positive change is possible when communities work together. Comment below with your own stories of community transformation, and don't forget to let us know where you're watching from. As Maria often tells her students, sometimes the scariest moments can lead to the most important changes if we're brave enough to help each other through them. The story of Century City Mall continues to inspire communities across America to stand up, speak out, and work together for positive change. Remember, as Stallone says in his community presentations, real heroes aren't just in movies, they're in our neighborhoods, standing up for what's right, working together to make things better. The legacy of the Century City Mall incident proves that when we stand together, real change isn't just possible, it's inevitable.